Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local.
So
Mike, one doctor that did have a lot of reviews.
There you go. All right. Is Dr. Mormon, an orthopedist from New York City,
who was recently fined $100,000 by the New York State Attorney General's office for both buying massive numbers of fake reviews as well as inducing people with negative reviews to not leave them, to either pay them money to take them down, or he had a really creative technique when he thought somebody was unhappy with him. With ZocDoc, he would just declare these reviewers as didn't actually come to the practice, so they couldn't leave a review. He received a $100,000 fine. This was covered both in our newsletter and in the New York Times. There's several things that I find interesting about it. When I covered the story on Monday, he still had a 4.5 rating at Google for his personal listing. And when you looked at it, it was quite obvious. There were a lot of reviews from the time frame that New York State had looked at, and New York State had asked them to get a hold of Google and get these reviews taken down. 2 days later, after this guy hit the news, they were finally taken down. But when Curtis Boyd of Transparency Company ran his analysis on Monday, it was quite clear that there was still a large number of pods or related review networks that had reviews on his listing. Also, I noticed in the New York State notes about the case that, is it Kay Dean, the woman who runs fakereviewreport.com, I think it is, she was credited by New York State as having helped in this investigation. I went back to her site and found that she had reported him in May and June of 2020, so almost 3 years, over 3 years ago. And I'm quite sure that Google follows her blog because she's so prolific and well-respected and watched by the government. And so, it's amazing to me that Google's algorithm, which they claimed in February, I guess it was, of last year, was so much better at looking at these review networks to identify those that were cheating. And clearly, they didn't catch somebody who had been pointed out multiple times historically, and only did so after it hit the press. So it speaks to the fact that their algorithms do not even rise to the level of a low-level human analysis of this business, let alone anything more sophisticated. And a point that David made, and I would let David speak to it, is just though the fact that New York State fined a doctor $100,000 in orthopedic surgery. $100,000 could be as few as 2 or 3 or 4 cases. One patient, and so the fine seems fairly insignificant. Maybe you could elaborate on that, David.
In fact, I would say not only does it seem insignificant, but if I'm an orthopedic surgeon doing analysis, even of the day or year in which I was first sort of noticed, to go 3.5 years being able to operate my business with this incredibly positive overall review profile. I mean, the doctor must have literally made millions of dollars over the interceding time between when this was first noticed and when the penalty actually arrived. And for the penalty to only be $100,000, if I'm a, somewhat nefarious, not so upstanding member of the medical community, I'm literally doing a cost benefit analysis and saying, wow, my ROI here is 30 to 40x. It's well worth the risk to continue this kind of awful behavior. So I thought it was just from a financial standpoint, like if anything, not only does it, not disincentivize this behavior, but for somebody who, really lacks a moral compass, I think it actually probably makes it more likely that these things will happen in the future. The second thing I would say is on the cost side of things, this is a 3+ year investigation to penalty, and I am not, fortunately, a New York State taxpayer, but Mike, you are. And I would be absolutely livid that my state agency wasted probably hundreds, if not thousands, of person hours, generally very high billable person hours in the legal field, to hand down only $100,000 penalty just strikes me as an outrageous waste of taxpayer dollars, particularly when there are many, many, many more important cases that the New York Attorney General is handling right now, in particular against former residents of the Oval Office. So,
Well, this is an interesting kind of microcosm of the larger problem, because here's a case with a very elaborate scheme involved. I mean, they were amateurs in one sense, but they went to great lengths, as you just pointed out, Mike, to defraud people in multiple ways, on multiple sites. And you had people going to this guy, and who knows whether he was competent, not competent, not, what his sort of standard of care and practice was. But there are real injuries here, probably literally and figuratively, that people sustained as a result of relying on reviews and doing business with this guy. We don't know that because I didn't see any of that information, but people went to him. They had surgeries. He might have done a good job. He might have misdiagnosed them. Who knows? But there's a real human cost here that is probably quite significant in dollar terms and otherwise. And the New York rationale, I'm sure, for the $100,000 penalty and investing all these resources and doing this investigation is, well, we're making an example, and this is going to get wide publicity, and others will think twice. But as you point out, David, that's not true. The incentives are all aligned to cheat, and especially in a high value category like healthcare, Google doesn't care about any individual practitioner. I mean, I think that that's really obvious. They're looking entirely at scale, and so lots and lots of individual cheaters and corrupt types can sort of sneak through and sustain this kind of cheating for a long, long time before they're caught. And it's really only the PR that motivates Google to act in many of these cases.
I would add that Google and New York State are two people we can easily criticize. I think ZocDoc is a third, in that they have now allowed this doctor to choose not to have his reviews shown on ZocDoc. That's the statement, as opposed to doing what Yelp would have done, putting a red badge of shame on this. I mean, it would seem to me that ZocDoc, as a professional site, has an even higher moral requirement to highlight that this guy has been cheating on his reviews.
Do we know whether he was? Do we know whether he was an advertiser or on ZocDoc?
I don't know whether he was an advertiser, but I know that he prevented patients from leaving potentially bad reviews by falsely indicating on the platform that they had failed to appear at a scheduled appointment. So we know he cheated on ZocDoc, and ZocDoc allowed him to remove his reviews.
Well, the idea that they're allowing him to not publish any reviews on his profile is complicity on their part, because they obviously see the reviews. There's probably a lot of mediocre reviews, and so they're just enabling this guy's cheating.
Exactly. The other point I would make in summary is that because of how critical healthcare is in our society, I believe that it will be the focus of these example cases we see coming from the FTC and or the states. I think that healthcare is likely to be a targeted area of investigation because of the implication of that. I don't think it will be enough or aggressive enough or frequent enough, but I do think that's where it is likely to happen more.
Well, Google should apply higher scrutiny to these your money or your life categories. In the same way that they try and do that on the SERP side, they should definitely apply a higher standard.
And we've seen in the analysis that I did of their algo that they do apply a higher standard to home services, for example. It's much harder to get a home services review through than it is to get a jewelry store review through their filters. So clearly they are capable at a categorical level of increasing the amount of algorithmic scrutiny. The problem is the algorithm isn't all that good, and doctors are who knows? I mean, potentially big advertisers. I'm not sure. So.
Well, in the end, it goes back to Section 230 and the immunity from any kind of liability on the platform side. So Google has total discretion about what it does or doesn't do around reviews without fear of punishment. However, the DSA in Europe has changed that to some degree, and we'll have to wait and see whether there are any fines that happen there. Some serious fines in Europe might motivate more action in globally, but we'll have to see. All right, so I think we've come to the end of another exciting episode of the Near Memo, and as I said, there will not be an episode next week, but we will be back in 2 weeks with a discussion about AI tool adoption in digital agencies. With Darren Shaw, Joy Hawkins, and Will Scott. And in the interim, if you're in the United States, have a great Thanksgiving. And if not, enjoy your weekend and whatever weather you're
Enjoy
experiencing.
A calm day on social media on Thursday.
Yes, indeed. Okay. See you next time.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.